Um, okay, yes. So you've done one round of it on Steplab. So basically, what Danny's asked me to do is basically in the past, what I've done is I've kind of like a little bit like a surgery, really. You know, just kind of helping people out and helping them to operate it better. I haven't personally been a mentor this year, but I was a mentor to a first year ECT last academic year, and I've given a few kind of help sessions like today to various people along the way, just to kind of help them to navigate it and to learn it a bit better and to give them some shortcuts and things like that, because some things can, you know, the kind of general feeling that I've got from people is that they've found it quite frustrating to use and quite restrictive. So I thought I would try and you know, help you out and just give you some sort of heads up on certain things. Is that all right?
Yeah, that sounds ideal for me, because I'm sort of there seems to be lots and lots of learning on there. I'm sort of looking at it, and there's things like I'm doing a one-day meeting next week, and I'm not sure. Do I have? It seems to say that there's work that I've got to do before that. No, it's not in the library. I can't remember where I saw it now. But there's sort of like I've got to do work before I go on this course, although I haven't been told anything about that. So it just a bit confusing in that respect.
Okay. What normally happens at kind of at the beginning of a cycle is that they run some online training sessions. So you get a booklet, one of the you know, the My Ambition booklets for training, and they just basically take you through how to use it and what you should be doing with your mentee and so on. Is that the training you're referring to?
Well, I've not had any of this because I'm joining in the middle of the
right. Okay. Yeah.
towards the end of the year, aren't I? So yeah.
Yeah, sure. So I think probably, yeah. Okay. So I think probably the best thing for us to do then is for me to kind of take you through it, step you through it, and obviously some of it will be familiar because you've done a thing on it anyway already. But for me to just kind of mention a few things that I found out, because you know, when I did the training with the booklets, and then when I actually got into the classroom and did the observing and the feeding back and that, you know, that weekly cycle, it kind of felt a little bit different, and I had to kind of modify what I was doing or what I thought I had to do so that it fitted. So yeah, so what I've done in the past then is I've done I mean, sorry, but it's just a step-by-step PowerPoint thingy that I just put together just to help people.
That's all right.
Understand. Is that all right? Yeah. So let me just share my PowerPoint window with you. This one here. Okay. So can you see it? Okay.
Yep, that's fine.
Okay, right.
Yeah, because I'm doing it from kind of trying to get it going and using it without having done the background work.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sure. Okay. So can you see it? Okay. Can you read everything? Is it the right size?
Yes. No,
okay.
that's fine.
Right. Okay. So right. So let's just right. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to come out of that and start again, because I can't see it because I've got a little laptop screen here and it's just too small. So let's go back. Okay, right. Let's see if I can share that. Is this any better? No, still doing it the same for me. Okay. Okay, so can you now see slide 2?
Yes.
Okay, right. So basically, the cycle I got myself into was this kind of observe, feedback, and mentor cycle.
Yeah, I think I've just joined that.
Yeah, and I was quite fortunate that my timetable matched up with my ECT's timetable quite well, and so unfortunately it didn't match up well with the observations. So what I ended up doing was having something like 2 classes to choose from for what I could go and observe. So I couldn't, for example, see kind of a breadth of learning across the curriculum and across, you know, different ability ranges and so on. So I was kind of stuck really with like a year 10 group and a year 8 group, but you know, it worked. It was fine.
That was timetable. Could you have got someone to cover a lesson or something, or part of a lesson?
Yeah, you could do that. Yeah, I mean, like I said, I was quite lucky in the fact that we could meet at the same time every week, which was really, really good form, because it really helped. It helped him get into a routine of doing the bits he had to do and so on.
Because that, can I just stop you? Because that was an ECT 1, so you observe and feedback every week, isn't it, with that? Whereas I'm got an ECT 2, and I heard that but I'm just wondering whether, because I've got 1 week I'm observing, 1 week feedback, but is that not too long between an observation to get the feedback?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, so we'll come on to that, but I think, I personally think, I mean, I've been teaching nearly for 30 years now, so, and I've done lots of these, I've been through lots of different cycles of mentoring and things in the past, and from various different kind of positions, but you know, giving feedback on a lesson as soon after you possibly can, I think is always worthwhile, because they can actually directly reflect on what they've just done. So, you know, I think from just a practical point of view, it makes sense to do that. But what I used to do, so just so that you know what I used to do, my feedback mentoring cycle was as follows. I would go and observe my mentee something like a Thursday or a Friday, and what I would tend to do is I would copy the text from Steplab and just paste it into the body of an email and say, this is what I wrote down about you, have a reflect on what I've said. And then when it came round to our mentor meeting on the Monday, he'd had a chance to have a little read of what I'd said.
That's quite good. Think about it and what yeah,
absolutely. So that the thing is about Steplab is that there's no way of, until you fed back to them and talked them through the observation and clicked on kind of finish, it doesn't actually go to their Steplab account. So you've got to kind of, so that was I think a bit clunky, and I don't think I can see why they've done it that way, but you know, we obviously like to give our mentees some immediate feedback kind of thing, so they can think about it, and of course they can think about their lesson. And you know, most of us will probably forgot the intricacies of what we were doing a few days ago. So that's just a little tip that I used to do. I used to just, like I said, you used to literally copy and paste. Even you can use the snipping tool, and you can, you know, snip the text and just paste it into an email and say, this is for consideration at our mental meeting, this is what I've said about you, kind of thing. And then when you do the mental meeting, you go through the form on Steplab and then formalize it. And of course you can edit it as well then, because it means that if you've got something slightly wrong, or you know, you weren't clear about what your ECT was doing, you can then edit it, and then when you press confirm or finish or whatever the button is, you know, you've got all your ducks lined up. So so my, like I said, my weekly cycle, I don't know how you do it on a 2-weekly cycle. My weekly cycle was observe towards the end of 1 week, and then meet on a Monday and do the proper formal feedback on the lesson, and then do the whole practice thing, you know, that we're supposed to do with the ECTs, where we talk through their next step of learning and demonstrate it, or they you know, do a role play with us or something like that, doing that kind of exercise.
That's what took me by surprise when I was doing the feedback. I thought it'd just be feedback. I didn't realize we had to also do the next step of learning. That's the first time I've done it was today, and I just didn't expect all this extra.
Well, I learned pretty quickly that the whole next step thing, which I'll go through in a minute when I step through it, but the whole next step thing was kind of, you know, you've obviously got to look at what they're doing and have a conversation with them about what the next steps are going to be. But what I tried to do is I tried to decide what the next step would be while I was in the lesson observing. So I would choose something that I felt that they needed to make progress with. And sometimes that wasn't always easy to do, because sometimes the lesson didn't present that I just had to look at Steplab. So what I'll do is I'll quickly go through this then, and see if anything doesn't make any sense. Obviously, stop me, because it's just you and I. So so with the first one, I click on to do the observation, and then into the observation, then it comes up with obviously with this next screen to do with observe and select. So you click on that bit at the bottom, which I'm sure you've done, and then during the observation, I would always take my laptop in with me, so I wouldn't transcribe anything, I wouldn't write anything down. I would always try to do everything I possibly could on the laptop. Now, that, I'm not the world's fastest typist, so that would mean that I was in the lesson longer than the 20 minutes that they tentatively suggest. I mean, it's not realistic, 20 minutes. I would spend probably more like 30, 35 in a lesson. But during the observation, so I'm flicking backwards and forwards between screens here so I can see it a bit better. So can you see the slide that says during the observation?
Yep.
Yeah. So you would, from your step that you've chosen for your ECT, you'd have all these little tap toggle things that to say whether the criteria was being met or not being met. And what I tended to do with those is at the beginning, when the ECT was pretty inexperienced, what I would be doing is I would be leaving quite a lot of them not met, because I felt that he wasn't meeting them. But then as I went through the year, if there was anything on there that I felt that he had met, perhaps I'd seen him in a previous lesson meeting, I would put it as met. So, even though you don't see every single thing during the lesson, I tried to be realistic about it and clicked on the ones that I felt that he was meeting on a regular basis. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
It can get a bit kind of too picky, and I feel like, we're professionals. We need to be trusted to be able to say, yeah, that this person is meeting that criterion. So so during the observation, I try to do as much, like I said, on the laptop as I possibly can. I try to toggle as many of those as I can, but if there's any that I don't toggle, then obviously that generates a conversation. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they've not met that week's criteria. It just simply means that there's a couple of things they need to work on. So then the next bit was the question. There's has he achieved this step? Has she achieved this step? And what I used to do is I'd always delete the question that was there and always give a question that was something to do with like student learning and, how did being positive with the students and your clarity improve student learning? Something that was related, but something that would be a key question that I could ask them. And I would try to stick to that key question and not go off piece, because otherwise it would turn into kind of like a bit of a talk, a bit of a chat, rather than something really direct. And then the next thing was about recording the praise. So this was something that I think I always tried to start with when I recorded any feedback. I always try to pick on things that that they were doing really, really well, particularly in response for something that you talked about previously. So what were the things that I felt that really kind of moved the lesson forward and helped the class to focus and all those kinds of things, and particularly tailored to the student, thinking, if there was, let's say for example, we've got a ECT who doesn't speak very clearly, just really highlighting that your clarity of your voice was really good and that kind of thing. So that praise, and I think you can now do, I think it's been updated since I last did this, but you can do like a little shout out or something, and it goes round to all of the ECTs and says well done to all of publicly to them. So that's quite nice. I think some of them like that. So this deciding on the next step thing, like I said, I tried to do this in the lesson. I tried to pick something. I mean, this particular one that's on your screen was obviously within these steps that we're supposed to go through with them. So I went and I looked at something that was related to the lesson, and if I couldn't find one that was related to the lesson, I just picked one anyway. So just to move things forward and have them aiming towards something every week, I made sure that during the lesson I was picking the next step for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the problem I've got, because she's an ECT too, but she was with a different school,
Right.
and she's never been with Steplab before. So I don't know. Obviously, if they follow from one year to the next, they will have things that you will have more of an idea of where they are with their. Whereas she'll have done stuff. Yeah, so I'm a bit of a. What I've done is I did exactly what you said. I thought, right, from what based on that, I thought I chose something that I thought would be. And then I talked to her about, do you think that's suitable? And she said, I'd rather do this as my target. So I'm letting her, because she's not got that long left, really. I think she finishes at Christmas. So I felt it was more important that she gets me to see what she wants to do. And so we've just discussed on what target we've set for next week then. So
that's fine. Yeah, I mean, it's like I said, it's the ones that you're seeing on your screen from my one are the basic ones that were from last year, you know, the behavior and the attention to the teacher and all those kinds of things. So I think the, like I said, the main tip that I give you is just try to get everything done on Steplab in the lesson as much as you possibly can. Fill in as many boxes and fill in as many. Decide on the next step. Focus on the next thing in the lesson, and then of course you can always edit it when you're in the mentor meeting with your mentee. Yeah, you're in a difficult position, aren't you? I can see why it's not straightforward.
Yeah, especially not knowing how the system works.
Yeah, that's right. You haven't got anything to go on from beforehand, and obviously the teachers hopefully passed all the basic stuff.
I think it's quite intuitive though, which is useful, as in it does guide you clearly through all these different stages. So in that respect, it's quite good. I think, I was surprised by that. We've got to do the modelling and all that lot. That bit threw me.
Yeah, have you got any questions about that?
Yeah, I haven't watched the videos on that bit, so maybe I need to go back and do that.
Yeah, I mean they come over as a little bit patronizing, to be honest, but I don't think it's obviously meant like that. But you know, particularly with ECT1 in the first year, you would get your ECT to kind of walk up to the whiteboard and go, okay, now class, and pens down, and 5, 4, you know, and do all that stuff, and you know, lining up and all that kind of walking them through the steps. So, but as my ECT year 1 went on, because I was seeing him doing that and he was practicing on a lesson by lesson basis, I didn't feel he needed that. And so the modeling then turned into, for example, right, you've got an end of module assessment coming up. We'll do in our next mentor session, we will look at the mark scheme and we'll talk about how it relates to the scheme of work. And so I will model marking some questions. You can mark the same questions and we'll see, you know, whether it matches up, whether you've marked them the same way I have. And so what I tried to do is I tried to build in all sorts of manner of things, you know, assessment and planning lessons and planning questions. We also went through, so I'd say, for example, right, what are you doing with this class next week on Wednesday, period 1? And he'd say, right, I'm doing this. I say, okay, send me your PowerPoint and I'll go through it and I'll look at what you've done. And then we'll discuss that and I'll model how I would put together, you know, mini whiteboard questions, all those kinds of things. And and so that's much more workable. And I think it's much more useful to the ECT because, you know, like I said, the modeling thing can feel a little bit awkward and, you know, a little bit kind of fake. But, you know, the other thing I would also do is I would, because I'm a science teacher and he was a different specialism to me, I would say to him, right, what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to plan a short 10-minute explanation of something complicated in your subject area, biology, as it turned out, and explain it to me. And then I will feed back to you as a student as to what you did well and what you didn't do so well. So so rather than getting the whiteboard pen out and walking up to the board and pretending the class are there, those sorts of little modeling things I think worked really well. So don't think you've got to stick to this whole thing of role play and things.
Because that sounds a lot better for an ECT too, where she's you know, like we were talking about doing revision, like you say, for the assessment, and maybe we missed an opportunity today because we could have then talked about, rather than I looked at that modelling and thinking doesn't really seem, like you say, a bit patronising. Whereas
I think they're yeah, I think they're sorry, it's breaking up a little bit.
Okay, go on, I'm all right. Can you
sorry.
not hear
So I
me?
was just going to say, I think their rationale is just that, they've got a step to practice, they've got to focus on a particular step, and it's just, it kind of makes them do it kind of thing, rather than it just being talking around it and then walking away and not thinking about it. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I found that the doing the thing in front of the class worked in terms of the first few weeks and months, but then it kind of moved on really, and we looked at lesson plans and things like that, and modeling what a good one of those looks like.
And what you're suggesting is actually really good, because it sort of preempts that failure. You're thinking about what you're going to do and you're guiding them in that respect,
Absolutely.
aren't
you?
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, it was not handing them the parachute as they fell onto the ground.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's
so,
good.
Yeah.
I like that idea, so I'll do that in future.
Yeah.
So make it relevant.
I think this is one of those things that I think, well, certainly when I first started Steplab, and a lot of other mentors as well, we had discussions about it, that we felt a bit straitjacketed by the way things are worded and the way things were put across to model. But every single ECT is going to be different. They're going to progress at different rates, and so it was trying to kind of straitjacket them into a kind of a pathway. And I get it. They've got to show all the competencies. That's fine. But I think, particularly like you said, in terms of ECT2, doing things that you think are going to be useful and that are going to benefit the class. The thing I always think is just that they're in front of live subjects, and so you've got to kind of you got to kind of hit it with as much success as you can, because it's the student's education. So the other one was, I think, deciding how to model a session. So so this thing about doing a script and standing up in role and practicing delivered scripted questions, I think, like you said, I think ECT2's past that. But like, if you see on, I don't know whether you can see this, deciding how best to model this in a mental session. Is that on your screen?
Yeah.
So the bottom there, I said, here's where I planned how to model this step. I said, design a short activity for me to do, commensurate with my ability to complete that activity. So, a bit of differentiation in there as well. And then question me to dig deeper and discover how I approach the problem. So that was kind of me modeling being a student, just so that he could think about how his explanations were going. So rather than pretending to be a teacher, he was kind of practicing honing his questions. And then, of course, we could stop halfway through and say, well, I don't think that was a very good question, or you didn't explain that very well. So yeah, just do what you think. You use your professional judgment with that, I would say.
Yeah, I think that just took me surprised, because I haven't watched the video about it all. Seeing all this extra stuff on the feedback, I kind of done the feedback. We thought about our next steps, and then it's like model it. Oh God.
Yeah. Like I said, I mean, the slide that's up in front of you now is the sort of video that they will show you on Steplab, and
packing eggs.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, but it's it's useful at the beginning, but not so much later on. So then the next one was the next steps thing. So the gather evidence to identify the next steps. That was really the feedback from the lesson. And so this is what I did on this. And this sounds a bit doing it backwards, but I found that it worked. Okay, so my tip for this would be I went through the next steps, and I looked through the next steps, and I found the next step that I thought was appropriate for my ACT. Then I went back to the feedback, and I wrote the feedback in the manner of leading to that step. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
So rather than writing my feedback and then going through the steps and finding something kind of wasn't related, I went through the steps first, and I flicked through Steplab's suggested steps, and I thought, okay, that one's probably going to help you in the most. So I'm going to choose that one. And then I went back and I wrote my feedback in kind of leading up to that next step. Do you see what I mean? So it was joined up.
Yeah.
And you know, and that worked really well, rather than, like I said, rather than just writing the feedback and then going, oh, which next step shall I do? And it wasn't related at all. It just made it a lot more joined up.
Yeah. Yeah, no, so mine's a bit disjointed then.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it's tantamount to looking at the mark scheme and then writing a question. You know, it was like that, really. You know.
Okay, that's good. No, that's really helpful. Thanks.
So the next one, let's see if the next one we have to talk about the next one.
Choosing the next step, then, isn't it?
Yeah. So this is when you've done in your mentoring session. You give them the feedback and then type in the questions or whatever it is, just finalize some things and then click done, and then it will recognize, it will come up with observation complete. The thing I would probably ask is there somebody at your school that is kind of leading this and knows?
Yeah, so I'm just doing the mentoring.
Yeah, I'd probably check with them, because in the background the people who are running this are looking at the usage stats of Steplab. So they're looking at whether the ECTs and the mentors are engaging on a regular basis. So, you know, so like I said, the back end of this, that they're looking at kind of the stats of engagement and things, and you just need to check that, you know, once every 2 weeks is enough for ECT2. If it is, then
that's what I was told to do by her. So
okay, that's fine then. Yeah,
it is, and she'll let me know. I can always just check anyway.
I just genuinely don't know. It's something that you'd have to check.
Yeah.
And then next slide was yeah, so that was just the sharing and modeling. Yeah, so the overall kind of the workflow that worked for me, which is really, this is the last slide that I think is the takeaway really for me, and that is, you know, the workflow worked for me was I met with my ECT, we decided on area of focus, discussed, modeled and practiced it, and that, you know, practice could mean, you know, like we just mentioned about looking over an assessment or planning a lesson, or even planning a 5-minute test or anything like that, any part of a lesson, and then setting the date for the observation. I say choose a class where success in the area of focus will be most straightforward to demonstrate, but sometimes you're stuck for whichever class you've got to do and you just got to do it. But you know, I try to aim for a high success rate just to keep the ECT, you know, positive and so on. And then the observation, like I said before, lasted between 30 and 40 minutes. They say 20 minutes, but really, I don't know how you can do it in 20 minutes. I'd rather get it all done and dusted and filled in on Steplab and then walk away from the lesson with my laptop on my arm, knowing that I was all ready for my mentor session. Remember, my my little tip was taking a screen grab of the feedback and sending it to your ECT so they can look at it that day and consider it for the mental session, especially if there's a gap in between. And this is the bit in under 3 where I said I would select the next step before completing the gather evidence to identify. So do it backwards, so to make sure there's congruence between the two of them. And then feedback face-to-face within a day or two. So do briefly, like I said, review it a second time. I would either screenshot or copy and paste the feedback so that my ECT could think about it beforehand and it wouldn't take very long.
Yeah, well, that sounds good. Yeah, that's useful.
So that's pretty much it. Are there any other things that you want to talk about that hasn't been obvious or that you're not sure about?
The only other thing I was wondering is, I know, did you do? I mean, it's the learning stuff that I need to do.
Yeah.
What do you have to do? Because there's a lot you can do, isn't there?
Yeah. So the ECT, so in ECT1, the ECT had basically Steplab automatically brings up once a step is completed, Steplab will then automatically bring up the next kind of module, you know, like thing for them to do. And what the ECTs have to do is, obviously in their own time, they have to plan time to go through that, watch the video, read the case study, read whatever it is about the step that they're going on to, and then that's something that you discussed at the mental meeting. Now, what I did with my ECT is right near the beginning, I decided with him when he was going to do that. So he decided, he chose this. He decided, because he got up on a Saturday morning and went for a run, and then he did his schoolwork on a Saturday morning. We agreed that he'd do his Steplab learning on a Saturday morning. So that's what he decided to do. So then on the Monday, when we did our mental session, that was done and we could talk about what it was. As far as I was concerned, obviously as a mentor, you're supposed to keep up with this and you're supposed to look at what they're looking at. So you need to look at the video that they're watching and the case study that they're reading. There's a set of questions on there with the work. So you're basically studying along with them, and you can answer the questions. But I didn't do that. I did it for the first few, and then when I got up to speed, I just typed the word done in each of the boxes, because it needs something typed in each box in order for you to complete it. So I just typed done, 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 and then pressed submit or whatever it was, and then it kind of went away. I used to watch the videos at like 1.5 speed to save a bit of time. That's a good tip. But I did make sure that I read through and I'd watched the videos so that I knew what the ECT had done. And the other thing you obviously need to keep on top of is that you can see whether they've done it or not. So there was a couple of times when my ECT didn't keep up with his study and I had to remind him to do it. And so, it would just add to his to-do list. You've got to get that module looked at and answered. So that's the other little bit. It's just, checking they're doing their homework.
Right. Okay. No, that sounds good.
Yeah.
No, that's really good. That gets me going.
Yeah.
That gets going, really. And I mean, obviously, I've got the training day next Tuesday. I'm not really sure what that will cover, but I'm sure that will help a lot anyway. So.
Yeah. I mean, it's just making it practical for teachers, like us, is that you've got a limited amount of time to do it. The school's probably given you next to no time to do it. And, as I've always said to people, I personally feel it's kind of like we're training people to replace us. So, it needs to be a good job made of it. So, but yeah, if where you can do as much in the lesson while you're observing, is that's the key for me. That really saved a lot of time, because I started writing things down and then sitting at a mental meeting writing more stuff down, then going on to Steplab and trying to fill it in, and it's just too much time. It was hours and hours. And so get as much into Steplab as you possibly can as soon as you can. Give the ECT a copy of your feedback so they can read it in their own time, and then you can just discuss the key learning question that you've come up with. How did this
keep
affect
it focused then, can't you?
Keep it really succinct. And then I would say the most important part of your mental session, for my money, the most important part of your mental session is like exactly what you said, which was looking at what you're going to do next and making sure that it's successful in the very next lesson you teach.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah, that's good.
That's
thanks ever so much for that then, Chris.
No, no problem. If you got any issues after the training or whatever, then I'm happy to do another call like this. But I'm sure it'll be fine.
It is quite self-explanatory, isn't it? Really.
Yeah. I just think that we all start off going, it's all really easy to do, and then of course what happens is we come across a bunch of targets that Steplab suggests, which we feel don't fit. Do you know what I mean? And you think, well, I've got to choose one of these. But again, we do so much more with the ECTs than we can ever put in Steplab. Discussion. I mean, I used to meet my ECT at break time and chat about what he'd been doing. So, do you know what I mean?
Well, it's like we've been talking about using the Sparks homework thing and that kind of thing, showing people how to use all those online things as tools that we have.
So try and see Steplab as kind of a thing to get through, something that's formalized, and just do your best with it. But it's what you do with the ECT that matters, really, not what really goes on to Steplab. but just obviously try to keep up with, you know, weekly or bi-weekly or whatever, and make sure it gets done, and the ECT is engaging as well, because like I said, the stats are being looked at.
Okay, all right, that's brilliant. All right, well, thanks
All
so
right.
much, Chris.
Thank
Okay,
you.
cheers, then. Bye-bye.
Take care. Bye.